Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Abnormal Haunted Dolls, Alabama. We just decided to combine the names. It's just, whatever. As you see, the hat on the big head there is. If I was ever shipwrecked on a deserted island, I hope I'm there with Kevin because he's got a lot of meat. I could survive off him for a few days.
You got a lot of meat too, so I'd be going for a long time.
I've lost about 30 pounds.
Oh,
yeah.
I have trimmed up a little myself, not quite 30 pounds, but
where have you trimmed up? Oh, you got a haircut?
Down below here off camera.
Well, you got to twerk again.
Say what?
You got to twerk again so we can compare it. Well, talking about bite me and eat me and all that stuff, we are going to talk about some cannibalism and maybe a little human sacrifice. But before we get into all that, of course, Kevin has got another DOLL in the tune of Raggedy Ann. And of course, he wants to see if he's got competition for Annabelle. Maybe it's related to Annabelle. Who knows?
Well, she's a big girl. She's Annabelle size. I know that.
So could it be a second cousin, a first cousin, aunt?
One of those first cousin twice removed type.
Maybe kissing cousin. Who knows? But just remember, you got to stick around because we're going to get into that. See that right there? We're going to get into that.
Yeah, that right there.
Okay, I think that somebody showed their. I'm trying to close that out. Why won't it close?
I don't know. There you go. Yeah, I see.
Who's that?
She's hiding behind the picture.
Is somebody actually showing their face? Are you by yourself or somebody holding the camera?
I'm by myself. I'm holding the camera up as I'm driving.
Well, you're doing a pretty good job of it. But he's going to talk to his Annabelle doll, the one that's about 2.5 feet tall.
All righty.
And while he's doing that, I'm going to bring out my Annabelle, my Clarabelle doll.
Yeah, her name is Clarabelle. Her name is not Annabelle.
Yeah, Clarabelle, the younger. I think Clarabelle is actually. I think Annabelle had a baby, and it turned out to be Clarabelle, and they both perished at the same time. And I don't know, did one of them eat the other one for dinner or something?
Oh, I don't know.
But then yours is bigger than Annabelle.
I think it's the same size because I've seen Annabelle up close and in person. Okay. This is the same size that.
Yeah, well, he never quite recovered from that. We saw Annabelle up close and personal, and it never was the same after that.
No,
he went to the
I avoided eye contact. I avoided eye contact.
Yeah, and then look at this. Look what he did just a couple of weekends ago. What is that?
That's that Billy D.
I watched the show with him in it the other night.
Billy D. Kevin's big face is so white that Billy D has to put on sunglasses to be able to endure it.
His personality is so bright.
What personality? You talking about Kevin?
Yep, look where I am.
Oh, you're at the train. Train I ride. So Kevin said he's going to twerk again tonight because he plans to lose some weight.
I did not say I was going to
twerk. Right, Kevin?
No, I didn't say I was going to twerk.
Oh, come on. We're going to have to go through this again. You know you want to.
I know I don't.
You know you want to.
That was a once-in-a-lifetime thingamajig there.
Oh, yeah. Look how many books you sold because of that one twerking.
Oh, it is.
And who do we have here?
Yeah, somebody's coming
back. Who is that?
I'm back. Now, is that
MP Freak?
Is that I can't think of their name. Emma or somebody?
I don't know. I'm just glad they're back.
I don't recognize their picture, but they could have changed their profile picture. But welcome back.
I recognize their username. Yeah, Emma. It's Emma. That's what
Emma, how you doing, Emma?
I remember that from the week
We're
after the
always,
convention.
always glad to have freaks on our show, even though Kevin is our biggest freak. And with enough rallying here,
It's free.
Kevin has lost some weight. He wants to try twerking again, so we
I'm not
compare.
twerking.
We
Why
compare
don't you
last
have
year.
a twerk yet?
We can compare last year's Kevin Butt to this year's Kevin Butt.
I've done my twerk, and Bigfoot did hers already, so you got to do one now.
Right. Kevin and I have already twerked.
No, you don't want me to because I didn't wear any pants for the show. So
please don't wear pants. Oh, he probably has on a pair of shorts.
All right. So anyway, the train still sitting there? We got your block.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have
to stop you. Where are you?
Highway 11.
Yeah,
in Alabaster. I'm gonna have to stop up here and get a little gas too.
Well, usually you've got a lot of gas.
Not that kind of gas.
All right.
It'd be a lot cheaper to fill my car up.
Yeah, well, just get Kevin to back up to your gas tank.
He's so fun.
All right, Kevin. We're going to turn it over to Kevin. Catherine, I'm removing you. You're rolling.
Okay.
And I'm going to remove myself, and we're going to look at Annabelle's far distant cannibalistic cousin.
Cannibalistic cousin. All right. I got the ghost box going here. Now I got to swing over here to this gigantic Raggedy Ann doll. And in front of this gigantic Raggedy Ann doll, who I don't know if she's haunted yet or not, I have a cat ball here. Now, if there's any spirit with the Raggedy Ann doll, if you'd like to play with this toy here, let me cut it on for you. You touch it and it lights up. So if you'd like to touch that, there, now it's off. Now it's ready for you. If you'd like to touch that, play with it, that should go off for you. You can see all the pretty colors. This Raggedy Ann, I believe, and I love that little necklace she's wearing too that her previous owner gave to her. This is the exact same type of doll that Annabelle, the real Annabelle, is. And this doll is 38 inches. So she's as big as Annabelle. And now there goes Kelsey showing his Annabelle thing off there. He's got a case for his.
I'm going to get Kevin captive, holding my cousin captive. Ah!
I'm going to do it through the cover because I'm bigger than you. All right, so I want to see, and I've got the ghost tube here. I want to see, is there anything with this Annabelle? So let me make sure I got the. Oh, come on now. Let me make sure I've got the volume up here. All right.
She's got the ceiling of her car there, and that looks like the remote to my garage.
All right, I do have the ghost tube on. If there's anybody here, I'd love for you to say hello. If y'all remember from last week, the ghost tube does not have static on it. It scans the channels, but there's no static. There it goes. Hello there. Hi. My name's Kevin. What's your name? That was weird. That sounded like something scary. Are you with this Raggedy Ann doll that's sitting here in front of me? It's a big doll. Can you touch that toy ball there and make it light up?
The chance.
Okay. Didn't quite catch what the lady said. There's a voice right behind that said, "Of course." Is this your Raggedy Ann doll?
Feelings.
Okay, there's that deep, creepy voice again. Is there a spirit with this Raggedy Ann doll? No. Is there something negative, something evil with this Raggedy Ann doll? Okay, that was very deep, and I sound like it said, "I'm right here." Is there something with this Raggedy Ann doll that means any harm?
Typically
That would what? Can you finish your sentence?
what?
There is something negative here. We don't welcome anything negative, any bad, evil spirits here. This is a house that's blessed by God, and you need to go back to where you came from if you're evil. Emma says in the chat that she heard the name Gregory. Is your name Gregory? Who is Gregory? Oh, it said me, I think. Are you a boy or are you a grown man?
Your decision.
Decision.
The word home.
Oh, that was a language I didn't understand just now. Do you come from Georgia where Miss Tammy lived? Podcast. Well, we're on a podcast right now. That's why I've got this camera in my hand. How many spirits are with this doll? Are you good spirits? Oh, there was some music. Do you like music?
The Jane.
The Jane? Not sure what that is. Is that some kind of music? Are you 11 years old? If you're able to, please make the doll move. Maybe move its hand or I didn't quite make out what that said.
Let's see here.
I'm glad you're here talking to me. I thank you for that. How about can you, if you're able to, can you please touch that ball? Please do touch that toy ball right here, and you can make it light up. I know somebody was lighting it up a bunch last week. Sure. You need me to set it up right? I think it's kind of on the side. See, I got it set up so now it'll light up just like that. As soon as that stops, if you want to tap it or just nudge it, it should go off. There's that creepy voice. I really love this Raggedy Ann doll. I've never had one quite this big before. Like I say, she's 38 inches tall. So it says it doesn't have enough energy to touch it. Well, that's okay. If you need to use something, this camera in my hand, it's plugged in. There's a plug-in right over there. A couple of electrical things you can use here. This phone is it's got some electronics in it, and it's more than half charged, so it shouldn't hurt for you to use a little if you need to. But I don't want to make you do anything that you're not able to or feel like doing.
Oh, come on, do your Zach Bagan thing.
Oh, listen to that. He wants me to yell at it. Come on, touch the ball.
Touch the ball. What? Down, you weak dog.
And what's hilarious is he's probably talking to the ghost of his own grandma, and he don't even
Look
know
at that. That dog's smirking at you because you're not manning up to it. Look at
That
it.
is a
Smirk on
snot
his
look.
face. Yeah, that's looking at you like, ha 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 ha.
Got a little bald headed self off here.
Yeah, Kevin's weak, isn't he, Raggedy? What's your name, doll?
Listen to that. It said, He's scoffing at you.
Has it moved any? Do you see any movement? You're moving
I
it around
don't
so
think the
much.
movement, but we got the name up there that Emma called.
Show us a sign. Are you related to Annabelle? Or you have any relationship to Annabelle?
So even Emma says it's not so smart to yell at it. So I like to try to be respectful because
I'm very respectful. She knows I'm having fun. She knows I'm not serious. She knows I'm a wuss. That doll's smarter than you are. Is that a wrinkled face? Is that how old is it?
It's just there's shadow on it because
It's
there's
an
only.
old doll.
Well, I mean, it's probably from the
It's a
60s.
senior citizen doll.
Oh,
That must be Ragged Annabelle's grandmother.
oh. I mean,
Are you
this
Annabelle's grandmother? I'm sorry I yelled at you. I didn't realize you were so old. I thought you were an unruly child.
Well, Emma says she got the age 11, or that's what she heard on the spirit box.
Yeah, add a zero on that.
Ah!
We're missing a zero, I think.
Oh, it just made a tisk sound at you.
See?
I was like,
Yeah, because she's missing her teeth. She's old.
oh my goodness. One day he's going to
Yeah.
wake up with scratches going all over his head.
Get a tissue and wipe the drool off her lips.
Oh my word.
Look how wrinkled that face is.
We
Of
can't
course.
ever do a serious
you have any-
investigation.
Do you have any Botox?
Do I have any Botox? I don't have any Botox.
Botox. Get the wrinkles out of her face. Give her a shot of Botox. Bring back her youthful appearance.
I want to see what name did. Let me scroll up here and see what name
Did a freak have a name for it?
that Emma.
Emma?
if I can
Gregory,
scroll.
it said. Is that a male doll? Gregory?
Okay, Gregor. It just made some kind of. Yeah, Gregory.
Is that Gregory?
And,
Did you hear something, Emma? Did it say something else just now?
we're just having fun, so I hope we didn't insult you if you're still
Oh,
here.
no. She's tougher than that. She's been around for a long time. There's a spirit named Gregory.
Yeah, and Emma said 11 when I think I asked the age or something. She said
And
11.
that said 16 or 17. I think it's a lot older. I think, how old is Annabelle?
Annabelle the doll. That doll came out in the 60s, I think.
Yeah, I know, but how old is the doll? That's when the Warrens took possession of the doll.
I don't know. But the spirit, I think, is 11 years old. Is what Emma was saying. It could be 16 or 17, but I know there's a spirit named Gregory. Okay. Gregory, are you still here?
Okay, so that's Gregory and drag. Now I get it.
Okay, it just said something, but you talked over. I'm sorry, Gregory. Can you say that again?
Oh, excuse me.
Gregory, can you repeat that, please?
Por favor. Might be Spanish.
Oh, that's the girl's voice. Yeah, the Annabelle doll was about 1970, I think, when the Warrens took it, or 71. So it had to be from the 60s, I think.
All right, but I think that doll that we're looking at there, Gregory, is the name that Emma heard.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot older than the 70s. And of course, Annabelle could be too, because you don't know
Yeah.
how the doll was when the Warrens took possession of it.
I just don't know how far back Raggedy Ann goes. I don't think it was too far earlier, 50s or 60s. She's saying multiple spirits at least.
I've heard something there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't.
So the character Raggedy Ann was created in 1915. The first Raggedy Ann doll.
15.
Yeah, the first Raggedy Ann doll was September 7th, 1915. And its name was Gruella. Or Gruel? No. That was the creator's name. And patent number D47780 on Raggedy Ann. Just for your information.
So, Gregory, where are you from?
I don't know why it would be Gregory, because all of Raggedy Ann's are female according to this. And now, of course, there again,
Well,
you might have slipped through.
there are male spirits with female dolls sometimes.
So we are Raggedy Ann up here. Mine's in a case because mine has a not a good spirit attached. That's why I had to attach that cross to her. And yeah, had to lock her up. She's been banished to the box.
And Gregory speaking again. What was that, Gregory?
For anybody that didn't hear it, the Raggedy Ann came out in 1915. Caitlin, how are you doing? You've been a very active young lady. All the stuff you've been putting out there. How do they find you? You look like you're casting a spell there. What are you throwing? Is that tarot cards you're throwing there?
Okay, Gregory, I'm going to try to switch apps here and see if that'll help you out. I'm not sending you away or closing anything yet. I'm just switching apps here. Let's see if this will help you a little bit better.
So does mine have a name? Yes, mine is Clarabelle.
Okay, Gregory, can you?
Caitlin, you've been putting the work in. I've been watching your stuff. You have been on top of your game.
Gregory, are you still here? Oh, it said I'm here.
Hey,
That sounds like a little boy.
I think Catherine got lost. I think she's in the outer darkness. Was she going through a drive-through?
Yeah, I didn't hear stop. I heard I'm here. Hey, Gregory, I hear you now. Hey. How are you, buddy?
Gregory prefers to be known as a female.
Gregory, did this doll belong to somebody you loved? Is that why you like to hang around the doll?
These Raggedy Ann dolls can be worth $500 and more.
Looks like we're going on 7:30. Is there anything you'd like to tell us, Gregory? Are you enjoying your new home? Well, I'm happy to have you. I realized it was getting kind of late. We have to do our stories, so. But if you want to hang around and watch, that's fine.
You leave your cat. Oh, where's your REM pod?
Over there, but I'm not going to turn that on because that scared him last week.
I scared you, maybe.
Seems like the kids don't like that skull. All right, Gregory, we're going to go ahead and all spirits who are here, we'll go ahead and turn this off. I'm going to count down from 5.
I don't know if Catherine can hear us or not.
And, when I get to 5, when I get to 1, I'll turn this off. So you don't belong.
I see a hand in the camera.
And all other spirits just back away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. Goodbye. Oh, Kelsey talking all through the spirit box.
I'm trying to get her to come alive.
Hey, Emma, go back and make sure you watch the last 2 shows because we had some awesome spirit box sessions the last couple of shows.
Yep. Yeah, we did.
All right, folks. It is now 7:31. We've got 30 minutes we spent talking to Gregory, the Raggedy Ann doll. And now we're going to segue right into what? Cannibalism.
Yeah.
Am I a cannibal if I eat pork chops and my nickname is pork chops? Does that make me a cannibal?
Yeah,
Nope.
because pigs are good pets. We went and they got a pig. We went to this guy, his friend over in Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And so, and you know how horrible Cherie was to that pig? Gave that pig bacon to eat.
Oh.
Can you imagine? Oh.
She's not horrible. That was turkey bacon, by the way.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you some turkey bacon.
I eat turkey bacon every Saturday. That's what we eat instead of pork bacon.
I don't like bacon.
Oh, I love it.
I have to be in the mood for it. I'll eat it occasionally, but not very often.
Nah, I love it. I'm loving it.
I will order a BLT without the L and out the B.
Where's the beef?
Here's Emma says cannibal means eating human meat or parts, but blood doesn't count.
So you can drink blood and it's not cannibalism? Good, because I need to drink some blood.
The cannibalism definition: the practice of eating the flesh of one's own species.
Oh, gosh. You recognize them guys right? That's a rugby team right there.
Is that the Donner Party?
That is a rugby team. And what do you say we get the full story of this plane crash? It was the old Christians rugby team standing near the fuselage of their Uruguayan Air Force F-227 plane 2 months after it crashed while ferrying them to a match in Chile. So, the title to this, Stop It. Stop. Yeah, the title of this is Stop It. It's one of those pop-up things that's not going to let you. God, how do I get rid of this? Get the heck. I hate this. I hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. They make you do horrible stuff.
Hearing about a
Hold on.
can with Robinson Crusoe.
Okay, now I can do this. Okay. So, do you remember a TV show some time ago called Lost?
Yep.
It's about the plane that crashes on a desert island. Well, this is the real story that was kind of loosely based on, except the island was the Andes Mountains, and the Lost were a group of boys who would face a dilemma too shocking and too real for prime time, whether to die a slow, excruciating death or eat the frozen bodies of their dead friends. This was a stark choice facing a rugby team from Uruguay, as some of their friends and family, when the plane carrying them to a match in Chile crashed on October 13th, 1972, in what was fittingly known as the Valley of Tears. Their story would amaze and disturb the world and become the basis for a best-selling book and the movie Alive. Roberto Canessa was a 19-year-old medical student when the plane went down. In the intervening years, he became one of Uruguay's best-known pediatric cardiologists. But the lessons he learned on the mountain never left him. His new book, I Had to Survive, How a Plane Crash in the Andes Inspired My Calling to Save Lives, tells the story of a young man who survived impossible odds and went on to devote his life to giving hope to others. Talking from Philadelphia during his book tour, he explains how the joy of living was the key to overcoming death, how he coped with the shocking dilemma he faced on the mountain, and why we should all be more grateful for what we have. So you were 19 when the plane carrying you and your rugby team crashed high in the Andes. Put us inside that moment. It was a very abrupt moment. We had rented an Air Force plane to go from Uruguay to Chile. We were trying to cross the Andes when the pilot said, "Fasten your seatbelts, we're going to enter some turbulence." Rugby players like to fool around and play macho, so we were throwing around rugby balls and singing a song, "Conga, conga, conga, the plane is dancing conga." The next thing, someone looked out the window and said, "Aren't we flying too close to the mountains?" The pilot had made a huge mistake. He turned north and begun the descent to Santiago while the aircraft was still in the high Andes. He began to climb until the plane was nearly vertical, and it began to stall and shake. Then we smashed into the side of the mountains. I was thrown forward with tremendous force to receive a powerful blow to my head. I thought, "You're dead." I grabbed my seat, recited a Hail Mary. Someone cried out, "Please God, help me, help me." It was the worst nightmare that you could imagine. Another boy was screaming, "I'm blind." When he moved his head, I could see his brain and a piece of metal sticking out of his stomach. I encouraged everyone to write his own book because there are 16 different stories of survival. Do you want to hear the rest? They were stuck there. We needed blankets, so we skinned the seats of the plane, which contained a wool fabric. We put all the suitcases at the back of the fuselage to keep out the weather. We made sunglasses from the plastic screen in the pilot's cabin. We used the bottom of the seats for snowshoes and built hammocks for the people with broken legs. Everyone had a role, and because I was a medical student, I was in charge of the injured persons. I had to drain infections from the boys' legs and stabilize fractures. I was also in charge of carting the dead bodies, which some people couldn't stand. We melted snow to get water. We filled our rugby socks with meat for the trek out and used the insulation from the kitchen to make sleeping bags. At night, we used rugby balls to pee in because if you went outside, your pee would freeze. You get very smart when you're dying. Cannibalism is when you kill someone. So technically, this is what is known as anthropophagy. I've had these discussions for 40 years. I don't care. We had to eat these dead bodies, and that was it. The flesh had protein and fat, which we all needed, like cow meat. I was also used to medical procedures, so it was easier for me to make the first cut. The decision to accept it intellectually is only one step, though. The next step is to actually do it. And that was very tough. Your mouth doesn't want to open because you feel so miserable and sad about what you have to do. My main issue was that I was invading the privacy of my friends, raping their dignity by invading their bodies. But then I thought if I were killed, I would feel proud that my body could be used for some others to survive. I feel that I shared a piece of my friends, not only materially, but spiritually, because their will to live was transmitted to us through their flesh. We made a pact that if we died, we would be happy to put our bodies to the service of the rest of the team. 3 of us hiked out. I didn't know it at the time, but as we walked, my father was in a plane overhead searching for us. When we got to the top, we realized we were much further from safety than we thought. So we decided to send Tintin back down to the plane to tell them we had headed south, so our food supplies would last longer between the two of us. We were at 15,000 feet and the temperature was 10 below zero. There were 2 moments that were turning points for me. One night, the moon came out so close I felt like I touched it. It was like a mirror, and I saw my grandmother when I was very young. Then on day 6, the snow stopped and I could see all the water and grass. It was like going to a 5-star hotel. We could drink as much water as we wanted. A lizard was looking at me. I thought it was sending a warning. What are you doing here? Why aren't you dead? So at any rate, in brevity, there's the story of these young men that in order to survive had to eat the flesh of those that did not survive from that plane crash. And that was the rationale of the one gentleman that subsequently pursued a career as a doctor. Now, I don't have a clue what Kevin has in store for us.
Well, see, you reminded me of the way further back in history. One of the most famous accounts of cannibalism is the Donner Party and their doomed journey westward. The Donner Party left Illinois for California in April 1846, but just 8 months later, their journey descended into mass cannibalism. Today, the Donner Party is virtually synonymous with one thing, cannibalism. But while most have heard about the gruesome tale of the Donner Party's cannibalism, at least in passing, the details of this fateful journey are less well known. At the outset, the pioneers of the Donner Party were just like so many others heading westward in the mid-19th century. Led by Jacob and George Donner, along with James Reed, they gathered in Springfield, Illinois in April 1846 and prepared to set out. But unlike most westward pioneers, they decided to take a supposedly shorter, yet untested route to California. Tragically, the route proved not only more arduous, but fatal. The Donner Party took so long trying to navigate their shortcut that they did not reach California's Sierra Nevada mountains until winter. There, heavy snowfall trapped them near Truckee Lake. Unable to move forward or back, the Donner Party quickly ran out of food. It did not take long for the social order to break down and for the pioneers to succumb to their hunger and resort to cannibalism. To this day, what happened to the Donner Party at Truckee Lake casts a long, macabre shadow over American history. Trapped in the Sierra Nevadas, the Donner Party ate everything they could. Because they'd already used up most of their rations on the long journey, they first killed their pack animals. To stretch out the meal, they sucked bone marrow and tried to make an edible paste from the animal hides. Next, the Donner Party killed field mice. Then they killed and devoured their loyal dogs. Lacking any more animals to eat, the frantic pioneers chewed on pine cones and tree bark, but it wasn't enough. And it did not escape anyone's attention that there was an alternative food source nearby: the bodies of those who had perished, whom the pioneers had buried in a snowbank. Diaries and letters written by the Donner Party survivors make it clear the pioneers succumbed to their hunger. Deep into their desperate winter, the Donner Party's cannibalism began. In one account, a young woman named Sarah Murphy Foster had hardly begun mourning her own brother Lemuel when she realized that other pioneers were already eating his heart. In another, Patrick Breen recorded in his diary that, quote, Mrs. Murphy said here yesterday that thought she would commence on Milt and eat him. I don't know that she has done so yet, but it is very distressing, end quote. And when wolves began to sniff around the snowbound graves of the dead pioneers, one pioneer wrote in her diary, quote, perhaps God sent the wolves to show Mrs. Murphy and also Mr. Graves, or Mrs. Graves, where to get sustenance for their dependent little ones. Was it culpable or cannibalistic to seek and use the only life-saving means left to them? End quote. When it came to the Donner Party's cannibalism, members were nevertheless determined to only eat people who had already died. But there were two tragic exemptions. On December 16, a group of the strongest members of the Donner Party decided they'd try to get help. So their party, which was later called Forlorn Hope, included two Native Americans named Salvador and Luis. The Native Americans had joined up with the Donner Party shortly before the blizzard trapped everyone in the Sierra Nevadas. They set out with the pioneers in December in hopes of finding rescue. But after days on the march, the Forlorn Hope Party found nothing but more snow, and they, already starving, began to get hungry. When one of the men quietly warned Luis and Salvador that the others might kill and eat them, the two Native Americans fled. And they were right to flee. The pioneers quickly followed their trail in the snow. Once they found the Native Americans collapsed in exhaustion, they killed them. Donner Party member William Foster shot them both in the head, after which they were chopped up, cooked, and consumed by the others. Their deaths marked the only time that the Donner Party killed someone to eat. Other Donner Party cannibalism stories emphasize the fact that they only ate people who were already dead. But although their journey was horrific, the Forlorn Hope Party did succeed in their goal. After a month, they stumbled onto a ranch in California and alerted the world to the horror unfolding in the mountains. In all, it took 4 relief teams 2 months to rescue survivors of the Donner Party, and each relief team brought back harrowing stories about Donner Party cannibalism. One man described seeing a, quote, revolting and appalling spectacle, end quote, at Truckee Lake that included human skeletons in every variety of mutilation. Another account claimed to have seen children sitting upon a log with their faces stained with blood, devouring the half-roasted liver and heart of their father. This account went on to describe hair, bones, skulls, and the fragments of half-consumed limbs around the fire. And one rescue party insisted that they'd seen a survivor, Jean-Baptiste Trudeau, holding a human leg while they arrived at Truckee Lake. Trudeau himself later admitted to cannibalism. In a conversation with H.A. Wise, who published one account of the tragedy, Trudeau allegedly confessed to eating both Jacob Donner and his 4-year-old son. Wise said that Trudeau told him, quote, "I eat baby raw, stewed son of Jake, and roasted his head. Not good meat, tastes like sheep with rot, but sir, very hungry, eat anything," end quote. But perhaps no story of Donner cannibalism is as chilling as that of Louis Keseberg's. The last person rescued from Truckee Lake in April 1847, Keseberg was purportedly discovered half mad and surrounded by half-eaten bodies. Other Donner Party members remember Keseberg, a German immigrant, as short-tempered and often cruel to his young wife. Rumors spread that he'd once confronted a young boy only to kill him, hang him up in his cabin, and later eat him. Rescuers of the Final Relief claimed to have found him with a cauldron of human flesh. Allegedly, they offered him food, but he demurred and said he'd come to prefer eating people. Other stories from the Donner Party reliefs are equally harrowing, if less stomach-churning. One describes how Margaret Reed had to make a Sophie's choice concerning her children when rescue first arrived. In journalist Ethan Rarick's book, Desperate Passage, The Donner Party's Perilous Journey, the writer used both diaries and archaeological evidence to garner invaluable insight into the tragedy, with the Reed account convincing him the project was worth his time. One thing that led me to the book is the moment when Margaret Reed is walking out with her 4 children with the first rescue party. It becomes clear that Patty and Tommy will not be able to keep going. They're going to have to be sent back. The idea that another rescue party would get in before they would starve to death is pretty unlikely, which means they're probably going to die. She has to determine, is she going to send back 2 of her children and try to go on? Is she going to go with them? It's like Sophie's choice. And she finally is convinced that she should go ahead with her 2 children. As they say goodbye, Patty looks at her mother and says, "Well, Ma, if you never see me again, just do the best you can." Though such accounts remain infamous even after nearly 2 centuries, actual stories of the Donner Party's cannibalism are harder to come by. The survivors gave contradicting stories and often retracted what they'd previously said. Trudeau, for example, later denied he'd eaten anybody. The first-hand accounts of rescuers and witnesses, however, along with the informed, researched opinions of journalists and historians after the fact, confidently state that as many as 21 people were eaten. Eating human flesh was a total last resort, said author Michael Wallace. People say, "Oh, those cannibals, how could they do that?" I turn it around and say, what would you do if you are a mother watching your children starve and freeze to death? Wallace argues that when it came to the Donner Party, there was no black and white, only gray. The pioneers were desperate. Many of them had young children. Trapped in the mountains, they did what it took for their families to survive. Some of them never spoke of it again, Wallace noted. Some denied it, but not that many. So there's the Donner Party cannibalism.
I was going to say, Kevin, that the best bet for you is never to get stranded with some people because you got some healthy stuff over there.
And that goes ditto for you too there, Kelsey. You still got plenty of meat on that bone. I don't care how much.
I never seen it.
So you're already skinned. I got all this hair. So
I got something interesting for you here, bro.
Okay, bro.
I got something interesting for you here. If you want to talk about cannibalism, you want to hear this story? You want to know the facts of
Okay.
this thing? Let's start
Okay.
out. The first thing you need to know is cannibalism is absolutely legal in the United States, with the exception of one state,
Oh.
and that's Idaho.
Ah.
And however, Cornell Law School notes a number of laws are in place across America that indirectly make it impossible to legally obtain and consume the human body matter. The same can be said for the many other countries in which cannibalism isn't directly illegal, but they make it damn near impossible to come up with the body to eat. For example, in much of the world, desecrating a corpse is a crime. On top of this, in cases where the flesh is somehow obtained legally, a cannibal can be charged for crimes ranging from outraging public decency to preventing a lawful burial, giving the law a number of avenues to prosecute cannibals in this regard. All that said, if a person was mindful of all these laws and managed to obtain some human flesh legally, they could quite literally eat said flesh in front of a cop, all while wearing a sandwich board advertising the fact that they're a cannibal and suffer no legal consequences. So if you really want to do it and you think you can come up with a legal way to obtain the flesh, the human flesh, to eat it, you could do that, Kevin.
Oh.
While this might sound like a fantastical example, in fact, something like this has actually happened. Enter Canadian performance artist Rick Gibson. Before his cannibalistic endeavors, he was probably most famous for taking a couple of human fetuses and making earrings out of them. These were then placed on a female mannequin in yet another lovely example of modern art at its finest. As for his cannibal art, he states, I was given a bottle of preserved human tonsils by a friend of mine in London. He was hoping that I would make a pair of earrings out of them. Instead, I decided to eat them. Preserved in alcohol, they made a wonderful canopy. By eating this hors d'oeuvre at 1:30 p.m. on 19th July 1988 at the corner of Erskine Road and the High Street of Walthamstow Market, I became the first cannibal in British history to legally eat human meat in public. Disregarding the questionable accuracy of that last sentence, despite some public outrage over the events, the police were forced to admit that nothing Gibson did was technically illegal, and he celebrated getting away with it by eating a human testicle hors d'oeuvre in front of the police station. The key here was that in each case, Gibson obtained the flesh legally from people who had surgery to remove organs and managed to convince the respective hospitals to give them the body parts back, a not so easy task. In a similar publicity stunt, one Mayo Sugiyama of Japan had his testicles, scrotum, and penis removed when he was 22, and he served them to dinner guests at $250 per plate, a total of 6 plates. His motivation here was to raise awareness for the sexual minorities, in his case specifically being an asexual individual. As for legal ramifications, as in most countries, Japan has no specific laws against cannibalism, so there was no problem there. However, after the event, Sugiyama was initially charged with indecent exposure, as he had shown pictures of his flayed penis and testicles to the 71 gathered guests before serving the prepared genitals to the few who had paid for the meal. However, as everyone at the event had known this would happen and why they were there, the charges were later dropped. That said, according to the culinary director of Serious Eats, J. Kenji Lopez Alt, Sugiyama had nevertheless botched the event. You see, it turns out his prepared genitals didn't taste that great and were very rubbery. I wonder if he had a condom on. Oh, I'm sorry. Leading Kenji to lament. The chef didn't cook it right. What a waste of a perfectly good penis. Penis is pretty tough and needs to be slow cooked. either Susan A or in a breast. The more you know. In any event, the fact that there's no direct law against cannibalism in most of the world means the courts often have to wrestle with whether a given act of cannibalism should be prosecuted for violating some tangential law. Most notorious on the front was the case of Armand Muse, and I'm going to let our friend Kevin carry on that story, if he would.
Okay.
German guy. So I'm going to stop right there because I don't want to delve into Kevin's territory.
Look, Carl has just come on. I think he's shocked by what we're talking
Hello, Carl. That's better than not being here at all, Carl. Let's
Yeah.
see. Carl looks like he's an outdoorsman, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It-
Yeah, it does.
All right, so Kevin's going to tell us really, and I remember when this is a recent story. This is not ancient news that Kevin's about to share, and we'll find out the outcome. What happened to the guy that? Well, we know what happened to the one guy. We got that. So the next question is, what happened to the other guy?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this took place in Germany, and let's continue forth. I'm going to just back us out of here and let Kevin have this. Give your full attention to this guy
Yeah.
right there, right there, the big-headed
Yeah.
guy.
The big headed guy. Ooh,
He's got his Donald Trump. No, that's my own
no,
dog.
myhaunteddogs.com. And these are for sale at my website, myhaunteddogs.com. I got some hats in stock. All right. Mr. Muse over here. Mr. Armand Muse over here. Let's start this story. Let's get this party started. Armand Muse spent much of his youth devouring German fairy tales. He was particularly fond of Hansel and Gretel. I wonder why. And its evil witch who abducted 2 children to fatten them up for slaughter. With a lifelong urge to eat somebody himself, Muse found a willing participant online who agreed to have his penis cut off and eaten. The macabre incident in March 2001 left Germany in shock, and Muse became infamous as the Rotenburg Cannibal. Muse was a computer repair technician who mowed his neighbor's lawn, helped friends fix their cars, and hosted charming dinner parties. Abandoned by his father as a boy, however, he became obsessed with serial killers and desperate to taste human flesh. When his mother died, the 39-year-old placed an ad on a now-defunct forum called The Cannibal Cafe for a, quote, young, well-built man who wanted to be eaten, end quote. And after 43-year-old engineer Bernard Brandis replied with interest, Muse agreed. So Brandis left his home in Berlin for Muse's house in Rotenburg and took 20 sleeping pills to dull the pain of the amputation. The first bite was, of course, very strange, Muse said in a 2016 interview with The Independent. It was a feeling I can't really describe. I spent over 40 years longing for it, dreaming about it, and now I was getting the feeling that I was actually achieving this perfect inner connection through his flesh. The flesh tastes like pork, but stronger. Armand Muse was born on December 1st, 1961 in Essen, Germany. While he had 2 half-brothers on his father's side, the patriarch and his 2 favorite children abandoned Muse when he was 5 years old. Raised in a 44-room farmhouse by his single mother, Waltraud Muse, he became obsessed with true crime and carnal taboos. Trying to get back here. He recalled struggling as the newfound man of the house and first pondered eating his classmates as a schoolboy. Muse invented an imaginary brother named Frankie in order to share his cannibalistic thoughts with somebody. According to the Irish Times, his fascination grew into adulthood, but truly came to a head when his mother died in 1999. Muse now had free reign over the expansive property and spent an entire year reading serial killer biographies. His urges grew. They only grew after he found a second life with like-minded people online. Armin Muse posted on the Cannibal Cafe as Anthrophagus or Frankie and succeeded in finding gay men with cannibalistic fetishes. While Muse met several men in hotel rooms to roleplay the act, none agreed to go through it. And Muse even turned one man down who wanted to be beaten to death, which Muse considered weird, according to the Daily Mail. On March 6, 2001, he chatted with a user named Cater99, who said he wanted his penis bitten off and to be killed. That user was Siemens engineer Bernard Jurgen Brandes, and he was prepared to be slaughtered. According to Harper's, he agreed to Muse's proposal, which read in part, quote, "After you're dead, I'll take you out and expertly carve you up. Except for a pair of knees and some fleshy trash, skin, cartilage, tendons, there won't be much of you left. I'll dry out the knees and grind them up soon after. You won't be the last, hopefully. I've already considered catching a young person from the street." Armin Muse and Bernard Brandes continued exchanging passionate messages online until March 9, when Brandes took the day off work. He had sold all of his personal belongings, including a sports car, and erased his hard drive before the big day. He bought a one-way ticket to Kassel, where Muse was waiting to drive him to his house. After stopping at a pharmacy for painkillers, the men arrived at Muse's house and engaged in sexual orientation, according to the Daily Mail. Brandes briefly backed out of the agreement, but then swallowed 20 sleeping pills, cough syrup, and a bottle of schnapps to go through with it. Muse made sure to videotape the ordeal, with Brandes saying, quote, "Now do it," unquote. What happened next has only been seen by state officials and bold internet sleuths. First, Armin Muse tried satisfying Brandes' request to bite the penis off, but failed. He then used a kitchen knife and tried feeding it to Brandes, but it was too tough to chew. Muse then fried it with salt, pepper, wine, and garlic, and Brandes' own fat. Ultimately, Bernard Brandes only managed to gulp down one bite. His continuous blood loss was so extreme that he went in and out of consciousness. After accidentally burning the penis, Muse ground it up and fed it to his dog. He then drew Brandes a bath and left to read a Star Trek book, checking on Brandes every 15 minutes. While cannibalism was not a crime in Germany at the time, murder was. Muse prayed for Brandes to regain consciousness, but then he stabbed him in the throat, killing him. Muse hung his body on a meat hook to drain, dismember on a butcher block, and placed his flesh in meal-sized portions in his freezer. "I decorated the table with nice candles," said Muse of his first meal. "I took out my best dinner service and fried a piece of rump steak, a piece from his back. Made what I call princess potatoes and sprouts. After I prepared my meal, I ate it." Armin Muse kept his promise to Bernard Brandes and buried his skull and other inedible body parts in the garden. Over the next 20 months, the Rottenburg cannibal ate 44 pounds of his flesh. Muse had also recorded all 4 hours of the mutilation, however, which authorities would enter into evidence for one of Germany's most shocking post-war trials. Muse was only caught on December 10, 2002. He had continued to seek out victims online until an Austrian student reported him to the police. When they entered his home, they found a false bottom in his freezer and pounds of flesh. While Muse said it was wild boar meat, the officers also found the footage of his killing. While his crimes suggested insanity and Muse was diagnosed with schizoid personality disorder, he was deemed fit to stand trial, according to NBC. The proceedings began on December 3rd, 2003, and saw Armin Muse convicted of manslaughter on January 30th, 2004. Sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in prison, he has since become a vegetarian. Ultimately, a German court retried Muse in April 2005 after prosecutors argued he should have been tried for murder. While he was sentenced to life in prison on May 10, 2006, according to 9 News, Muse has recently been permitted to wander the streets in disguise as part of his rehabilitation. So, yes, folks, he is out there wandering the streets. Allegedly a vegetarian now, but I would steer clear around dinner time.
I would say that I wonder if he's looking for organic humans.
Organic humans. Is that then they're fake?
You know, some that haven't been fed anything but organic foods, I guess. They haven't been fertilized or whatever. I don't know. They were not humans not processed by Monsanto. How's that? There is what? I'm sorry.
I just said okay.
Okay. So we did cover the fact. If you didn't get it, you can go back and listen to it. But cannibalism in its very basic form is a legal activity. The problem is getting a hold of the flesh and desecrating a body, and those kind of laws come into play. I don't think that my friend Kevin has covered the 3 sailors, Tom Dudley, Edwin Stevens, or Ned Brooks. We haven't covered that, have you?
No, I have not.
So, if you're unfamiliar with this case, it was in 1884, 3 sailors named Tom Dudley, Edwin Stevens, and Ned Brooks, and then their cabin boy, Richard Parker. They became lost at sea after a wave destroyed their ship. Cast adrift with only a few pounds of turnips for sustenance, Dudley and Stevens eventually made the grisly decision to kill and eat Parker, the cabin boy. Oh boy. Brooks played no part in the murder, but would later admit to consuming Parker's flesh and drinking his blood to survive. Upon being rescued by a passing ship, Dudley and Stevens immediately confessed to killing Parker. The 2 men defended their decision by saying that Parker had become violently ill after consuming salt water and was at death's door anyway. Both sailors argued that killing Parker was morally justified to necessitate their own survival, citing the custom of the sea, which had seen many a marooned sailor drawing lots and eating one another to survive, generally with no consequences to themselves after the fact, so long as the lottery of who should be killed was deemed to have been fairly implemented. The thing is, though, nobody aboard the Mignonette had drawn lots. Stephen and Dudley even admitted that they had held Parker down as they slit his throat to stop him from struggling. The British courts disagreed that killing Parker was necessary, as there was no way for the men to know that a ship wasn't about to crest the horizon and rescue him. And the fact that they needed to physically restrain Parker seemingly meant he couldn't have been that close to death. On that note, a judge would later argue that to justify Parker's murder as a necessity, each man would have had to have been on the very precipice of death. It's also worth noting that in previous cases where sailors had noted the custom of the sea after being marooned and drawing lots to justify murdering and eating members of their own crew, cabin boys, slaves, and other people of low rank disproportionately found themselves drawing the short straw. This led to people calling into question whether these lotteries were actually fairly implemented, as the sailors invariably claimed, partially spurring the counts to finally set a legal precedent for how to proceed in similar cases. in effect making an example of Stevens and Dudley. Thus, a decision was made to try each man for murder, which was a capital offense at the time. The problem was the public was largely on the side of Dudley and Stevens, and a jury seemed initially reluctant to condemn the men to death for doing something to survive in a desperate situation. As for Brooks, he wasn't convicted of any crime and was largely let off despite readily admitting to consuming Parker as well. The key distinction here was that he didn't take part in the actual murder in any way. As for the other men, they were initially convicted of murder and sentenced to death, but in part due to public pressure, their sentences were later commuted to 6 months in prison. But the case did set a legal precedent that there is no defense of necessity for the crime of murder in cases like this, and it's now well established in law that the killing of another human being to aid your own survival by consuming their flesh can never be justified in a legal sense. So Kevin, stop that. Again, eating an already dead person in the same type of situation is perfectly legal in most countries. Don't die before we come. Of course, the law is one thing. It's a whole different thing to wrestle with the moral aspect of the act. For example, there is the case of the now infamous, we talked about that Air Force, the rugby players in Flight 571 that crashed in 72. Despite initial religious reservations from most on board, every survivor eventually gave in to hunger, which speaks to the power starvation has to test the very limits of a person's personal morality. There is case after case after case, as we well know. And if you've got another story to share there, Kevin?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, when you get through with that, I'm going to kind of shift this over to human sacrifice a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I want to tell about
Kevin, the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah. I want to tell this one that I don't know if I ever heard of them before or not. You know, we've got our Jeffrey Dahmers and our Ed Geins. Those are famous cannibals, but I like covering the ones we don't really hear about or never heard of before. And here's Nikolai Zumagalev. I probably butchered that name. It looks like it's pronounced Zumagalev. Nikolai Zumagalev. He was born November 15, 1952 in Soviet Union to a Kazakh father and Belarusian mother, the third of 4 children and only son of his family. After a childhood fight that left him without his front teeth, Nikolai was given the option to be fitted with dentures. Rather than the traditional plastic resin or porcelain teeth, however, Nikolai was fitted with teeth made from white metal. After completing the 9th grade of school, Nikolai entered a railway school. Following his graduation, he was assigned to work at Adderall. In 1970, at age 18, he was conscripted into the Soviet Army, serving in chemical defense in Samarkand and Otar in Uzbek SSR. In 1973, he applied both to enter Kazakh University and for a chauffeur job, but he failed on both accounts. After he traveled the Soviet Union, visiting the Ural Mountains, Siberia, and the Murmansk, where he tried a number of professions, including a sailor, a forwarder, electrician, and bulldozer operator. Though considered a second-rate man physically and known for missing his front teeth as a result of a fist fight, which he had replaced with those white metal dentures, he was valued for being always clean-shaven and well-dressed and had little trouble picking up women and having casual sex. He looks like he could be a James Bond villain. Not the main boss, but the one you kill to get to the main boss. Because he doesn't have the big baddie villain energy that these fictional characters have. He's got less energy. In 1977, he returned to Uzunagak, where he took a job as a firefighter. Shortly after, he was diagnosed with 2 sexually transmitted diseases, syphilis and trichomoniasis. Nikolai blamed women as a whole, and he developed an intense hatred for them. He planned his first murder very carefully in January 1979. He killed a woman traveling along a rural path outside of Uzinagash. He selected a Seventh-day Adventist woman walking along by the side of the road between Uzinagash and Maybelloch and approached her from behind. When she turned back, he grabbed her, dragged her to the side of the road, and slashed her throat while he raped her, drinking the blood emanating from the wound afterward. During the investigation, Nikolai described his first murder. He said, "I always loved to hunt and often went hunting, but this was my first time hunting a woman. When I went out on Uzanagik Maybelloch track, I saw some young peasant woman. She was alone. I felt my heart pound within me, and I ran after her. Hearing my footsteps, she turned around, but I caught up with her and put my arm around her neck and dragged her to the side of the landfill. She resisted, but I cut her throat with a knife. Then I drank her blood. At this point, from the village appeared a factory bus. So I lay down on the ground and crouched next to the body. While I was laying there, my hands grew cold. After the bus drove past, I warmed my hands on the woman's body, then stripped her naked. I cut the corpse's breasts into strips, removed the ovaries, and separated the pelvis and hips. I then put these pieces into a backpack and carried them home. I melted the fat to fry with, and some parts I pickled. Once I put the parts through a meat grinder and made dumplings. I saved the meat for myself. I never served it to anyone else. Twice I grilled parts, the heart and kidneys. I grilled meat too, but it was tough and I had to cook it for a long time in its own fat. The meat of this woman took me a month to eat. The first time I ate human flesh, I had to force myself, but then I got used to it. Though a criminal investigation was opened for the grisly murder, it was closed because of the lack of leads. Nikolai murdered 5 more women over the following 6 months. On August 21st, he shot a firefighter colleague during a drunken fight. Unaware of the serial killings, the police arrested Nikolai for manslaughter, but he was found not guilty by reason of insanity after he was diagnosed with schizophrenia at Moscow's Serbsky Institute. Nikolai was released after a year and returned to Uznagak, where he killed 3 more women and served their flesh to unsuspecting friends in cookouts. In December of 1981, he hosted a dinner party for friends, inviting several people over to his home. Unbeknownst to them, one among them would not make it out alive. Shortly after the guests arrived, Nikolai pulled one of them aside into a separate room for conversation. But instead of a chat, he killed the guest. Despite the fact that several other guests were just rooms away, Nikolai began to dismember his guest right there. When the other people came looking for him, they came upon a horrifying scene. But Nikolai did not notice them. They fled and reported him to the police. When the police arrived, they found Nikolai kneeling in front of the dismembered corpse, covered in blood. The officers were so shocked to find Nikolai hacking the corpse while in the nude and covered in blood that he was able to escape without incident, still armed with the axe. A 24-hour manhunt commenced, ending the next day when he was found hiding out at his cousin's house. While in custody, Nikolai confessed to the women's murders, claiming that they were sex workers and that he wanted to rid the world of them. He was tried on December 3rd, 1981, and was once again found insane. This time, the court established that he should be sent to a mental clinic where he would receive compulsory treatment. 8 years later, in 1989, he put in a request for transfer to another facility. Then on August 29th, 1989, while he was being transported to another mental facility, Nikolai escaped from custody. The people with him said it was like he vanished into thin air. He made his way to Kyrgyzstan, where he hid in the mountains and traded wild medicinal plants for food. As he felt the authorities closing in, he contacted a friend and convinced him to send a letter to Nikolai's family from Moscow in order to make the government believe that Nikolai was still in the capital. The letter finished with Nikolai's reassurance that he would not return home because there were many women in Moscow and nobody would miss them. This information was picked up by the newspaper called Kurants, which also reported that Nikolai had been seen in the city and its surrounding region. The authorities refuted this information publicly in order to avoid a panic. Nikolai got tired of being on the run and devised a plan to get himself arrested for a minor crime and sent to jail under a false identity. He stole sheep in Fergana with the aim of being imprisoned in the Uzbek capital. After his arrest, he confessed to the theft and claimed to be a Chinese citizen. However, he could not explain how he had entered the Soviet Union. Fergana police got suspicious and requested help from Moscow. As a result, Moscow detective Yuri Dibazhin traveled to Fergana, and he immediately recognized Nikolai. Nikolai was again sent to a mental hospital. After the fall of USSR, the hospital declared him sane and attempted to send him back to his hometown repeatedly, but the locals, the people from his hometown, were like, "No way, we don't want you here." Eventually, he was moved to a high-security clinic in Actus, a village near Almaty, where he remains today and is allowed to work as a repairman. Nikolai petitioned unsuccessfully to be given the death penalty during his third institutionalization. In 2014, he was charged with the 1990 murder of a female student in Aktobe, whose death fit his MO. In January 2016, a rumor gained traction in WhatsApp and Facebook, claiming that Nikolai had escaped again and murdered a woman on New Year's Eve. The information was picked up by tabloids in Australia and the UK, but Kazakh police merely stated that there was no order of arrest for Nikolai. A 21-year-old female student from Uzhengod was later identified as the originator of the rumor and was arrested for the same. So he is still locked away in an institution. And he was a good-looking guy there. He looks like you would not know he was a cannibalistic murderer.
Well, there's something to be said about eating flesh, I guess. All right, here we go. Want to shift gears. It's almost in the same frame here, and I'm about to anger my friend Kevin there, and I don't mean this in a sarcastic or a critical way at all. But in the world of religion and Christianity, there's an act called communion, which is a ritualistic, symbolic form of eating flesh and drinking the blood of the sacrificial lamb, Jesus. So there is this human thing. If you go back even through the Old Testament and old stories, the Aztecs and whatnot, we have had this kind of thing going on in human history a lot throughout human history. But it doesn't have to go back as some of the stories have revealed. I'm looking here at an article that came out in October of 2011. The village and farming communities that surround Uganda's capital, Kampala, are gripped with fear. School children are closely watched by teachers and parents as they make their way home from school. In playgrounds and on the roadside are posters warning of the danger of abduction by witch doctors for the purpose of child sacrifice. The ritual, which some believe brings wealth and good health, was almost unheard of in this country until about 3 years ago, which would have been 2008. But it has re-emerged, seemingly alongside a boom in the country's economy. The mutilated bodies of children have been discovered at roadsides, the victims of an apparently growing belief in the power of human sacrifice. Many believe that members of the country's new elite are paying witch doctors vast sums of money for the sacrifices in a bid to increase their wealth. At the Kayapisi Child Care Ministries Church, Pastor Peter Suankiryanga is teaching local children a song called Heal Our Land in Child Sacrifice. To hear dozens of young voices singing such shocking words epitomizes how ritual murder has become part of everyday life here. Child sacrifice has risen because people have become lovers of money. They want to get rich, the pastor says. They have a belief that when you sacrifice a child, you get wealth. And there are people who are willing to buy these children for a price. And so they have become a commodity of exchange. Child sacrifice has become a commercial business. The pastor and his parishioners are lobbying the government to regulate witch doctors and improve police resources to investigate these crimes. According to official police figures, there was one case of child sacrifice in 2006. In 2008, the police say they investigated 25 alleged ritual murders, and in 2009, another 29. The Anti-Human Sacrifice Police Task Force, can you imagine a task force of police that's called the Anti-Human Sacrifice Police Task Force? Was lost in response to the growing numbers, says the ritual murder rate has slowed, citing a figure of 38 cases since 2006. Pastor Suankiryanga disputes the police numbers and says that there are more victims from his parish than official statistics for the entire country. The work of the police task force has been strongly criticized by the UK-based charity Jubilee Campaign. It says in the report that the true number of cases is in the hundreds and claims more than 900 cases have yet to be investigated by the police because of corruption and lack of resources. Timpinesia led me to a field near her home where she found the body of her 6-year-old grandson, Stephen, ducked in the reeds. She trembled as she pointed out the spot where she found his decapitated body. He'd been missing for 24 hours. Clutching the only photo that she has of her grandson, Timpinesia sobbed as she explained that although the local witch doctor had admitted to sacrificing Stephen, the police were reluctant to pursue the case. They offered me money to keep quiet, she says. I refused the offer. No one from the Ugandan government agreed to do an interview. The police deny inaction and corruption. The head of the, catch this, remember this, Anti-Human Sacrifice Police Task Force. We're not talking about the 1500s, people. We're not talking about the Inquisition. We're talking about the 20th century. Anti-Human Sacrifice Police Task Force. Commissioner Bignoa Moses says the police are doing all they can to tackle the problem. Sometimes they accuse us of these things because we made no arrest, but we're limited. If we get information that someone is involved in criminal activities like human sacrifice, we shall go and investigate. And if it can be proven, we will take him to court. But sometimes the cases are not proven. At Kapala Main Hospital, consultant neurosurgeon Michael Humuza shows me the x-rays of the horrific injuries suffered by 9-year-old Alan. They reveal missing bone from his skull and damage to a part of his brain after a machete sliced through Alan's head and neck in an attempt to behead him. He was castrated by the witch doctor. It was a month before Alan woke from a coma after being dumped near his village home. Allen was able to identify his attackers, including a man called Awali, but the police say Allen's eyewitness account is unreliable. Local people told us that Awali continues to be involved with child sacrifice. For our own inquiries, we posed as local businessmen and asked around for a witch doctor that could bring prosperity to our local construction company. We were soon introduced to Awali. He led us into a courtyard behind his home, and as if to welcome us, he and his helpers wrestled a goat to the ground and slit its throat. This animal has been sacrificed to bring luck to us all, Awali explained. He then demanded a fee of $390 for the ritual and asked us to return in a few days. At our next meeting, Awali invited us into his shrine, which is traditionally built from mud bricks with a straw roof. Inside, the floor is littered with herbs, face masks, rattles, and machete. The witch doctor explained that this meeting was to discuss the most powerful spell, the sacrifice of a child. There are two ways of doing this, he said. We can bury the child alive on your construction site, or we cut them in different places and put their blood in a bottle of spiritual medicine. Lovely people. Awali grabbed his throat. If it's a male, the whole head is cut off and his genitals. We will dig a hole at your construction site and also bury the feet and the hands and put them all together in the hole. Awali boasted he had sacrificed children many times before and knew what he was doing. After this meeting, we withdrew from negotiations. We handed our notes over to the police, but Awali is still a free man. Allen's father, Simwanga, has sold his home to pay for Allen's medical treatment and moved to the slums near the capital. Sitting on the steps of their makeshift house, built from corrugated sheets of metal, I showed the footage of our meeting with the witch doctor to Allen on my laptop. He pointed to the screen and shouted, Awali, confirming he is the man who attacked him. Pastor Siwakanyanga says without the full force of the law, there is little that can be done to protect Uganda's children from the belief in the power of human sacrifice. The children do not have voices. Their voices have been silenced by the law and the police not acting, and the people who read the newspapers do nothing. So we have to make a stand and do whatever it takes to stamp out this evil. We can only pray that the government will listen. That, my friends, is from 2011, just 10 years ago, 11 years ago, not ancient history. Welcome to our world in the 21st century. Anti-human sacrifice police force. Can you imagine?
Yeah. I cannot.
That's a hell of a story.
Yeah, it is.
And that's not an old story.
Nope.
That's a recent story. And that from reading that, you think it's probably still going on.
Yeah.
So stop sacrificing.
Yes.
If you're talking, Catherine, your microphone is muted
Yeah, she muted.
and your face is now off the screen.
I said I was wanting you guys to put me back on.
And so that's, I mean, really, what a deal, huh?
Yeah.
Any questions? Do you have any other stories, or shall I continue with my human sacrificial stories?
So are we gonna find a human sacrifice?
Well, the thing is, it's hard to find a virgin nowadays.
Yeah.
But Kevin, are you a virgin? We can sacrifice Kevin. But then if we get hungry, look at all that flesh.
Look at all your flesh right there.
We'll open up a new
We'll
open up a new barbecue restaurant in Alabaster or Chelsea.
Yeah, okay.
We'll call it
Serve yourself.
Kevin's cuisine.
Yeah.
One of the most southern that's happened, if I'm not mistaken, right here in Alabama, cannibalism was fried green tomatoes. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Fried green tomatoes.
They barbecued him up and fed him to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that why Kevin has that pale, round face like that? Is he
Shut up about my round face and my round body and blah 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 blah. God.
It's better to have shape than none.
So, Kevin, when are we going to do another book signing adventure at one of these here things?
Well, I don't know of another one of these here things going on yet.
Have you ever done one of the oddity shows?
Oddity shows?
They do an oddities festival thing across the country. Have you ever been to one of those?
No.
Where is one?
I don't know. I'm just throwing some ideas out there. That's all.
No, I never have.
I know the oddity shop in Birmingham is having a big thing or something.
I'm not impressed with them. I'm sorry.
You're not. They had messaged me back saying they'd be happy to have us, but they never did tell me when. So
Yeah,
I
that's
asked
the
them,
issue. We're happy to have you, but when? Well, I don't know, but we'll get back with you.
I said, let me know what day is convenient. No response.
So the big question is, when we got 20 minutes left, do you have another story for us over there, Mr. Kane?
Yeah, I got another story.
Talk about human sacrifice. Remember, Cain and Abel.
Well, you mentioned children, and that reminded me of one. This one kind of goes far back, but not that far back. But this crazy old man named Albert Fish right here. Look at that creepy face.
What's his name?
Albert Fish.
He looks like a fish out of water.
We've all heard of or seen the boogeyman. He's the monster who hid under your bed and in your closet when you were a kid. He gave you nightmares and made you afraid of the dark. But what happens when a real-life boogeyman exists? In the early 1900s, too large a number of unfortunate children found out after meeting Albert Fish. He's been known by several different monikers: the Werewolf of Wisteria, the Gray Man, even the Brooklyn Vampire. But no matter the alias, Albert Fish was the notorious boogeyman killer whose attacks took place over the span of 10 years, causing terror in New York and throughout the United States. Born Hamilton Howard Fish, he changed his name to Albert to commemorate a dead sibling. Fish's father was 43 years older than his mother, and died by the time Fish was 5. Many of the facts regarding his early years are largely unknown. However, what little details we do have point toward a deeply troubling childhood. Mental illness and religious mania ran in the Fish family. After his father died from a heart attack, Albert's mother placed him in an orphanage. The reasons behind this are unknown, but we can safely assume they are linked to his mother's wavering income and her inability to care for all 4 of her children. The orphanage was where Fish was first exposed to violence. He was repeatedly whipped and beaten. During the course of his beatings, Fish began finding sexual pleasure in them, which brought on vicious teasing from the other children in the orphanage. In 1882, his mother landed a government job and was able to bring Fish back under her roof, but by then it was too late. The damage had already been done. Fish began a consensual relationship with another boy at age 12. This boy introduced him to extreme sexual practices such as drinking urine and eating feces. Fish began spending his weekends in public baths watching the young boys undress. He was still just in his early teens. Upon his arrival in New York City in 1890, Albert Fish became a prostitute to satisfy his sexual urges. However, when his day job no longer satiated him, Fish began raping young boys. This practice continued even after he agreed to an arranged marriage proposed by his mother. Fish married a woman 6 years his junior, and the couple had 6 children. Fish was eventually arrested for embezzlement and spent a handful of years in prison. During that time, he had sexual relations with countless men. Upon his release, Fish began an affair with a lover despite his marriage. One afternoon, Fish and the man visited a waxworks museum where the pair witnessed the bisection of a penis. Here we go again. From that moment on, Albert Fish developed a fascination with castration. Never underestimate the power of the penis, huh? At one point in their relationship, Fish managed to convince his male partner to be tied up as a part of a sexual game. It's unclear just how much of their sadomasochist relationship was with consent of this man, Thomas Kedden, who is believed to have been mentally impaired. After tying Kedden up, Fish kept him isolated in an abandoned farmhouse for weeks, torturing him mercilessly during that time. Eventually, the torture escalated to the point where Fish reenacted his waxworks museum experience and sliced off half of Kedden's penis. Intending to murder Kedden, Fish began to worry that the heat of summer would cause the smell of a hidden, dismembered corpse to be noticed. Instead of killing him, Fish cleaned Kedden's wound with peroxide and covered it with Vaseline. The final fate of Kedden is unknown. After this disturbing escalation, Fish increased the number of times he visited brothels where he asked to be beaten and whipped. In January of 1917, Albert Fish's wife left him for the handyman who had been staying with them. Shortly after his wife's departure, Fish began hearing voices. He once rolled himself up in a carpet, claiming that he was following the orders of John the Apostle. His children, who remained with him, do not report being abused, although claims that Fish had his children paddle him have surfaced over the years. The maiming of Kedden took place in 1910. It is believed that over the next few years, Fish mostly curtailed his nefarious activities, but began torturing, raping, and killing again after his wife left him. In 1919, Fish stabbed a mentally handicapped boy. From this time on, his victims were nearly always either mentally disabled or African American. Fish believed no one would notice when these children went missing. Over the decade, Albert Fish's crimes became increasingly violent and frequent. Although it's unknown just how many children he killed, thanks in part to his tendency to choose victims that would go unnoticed, the murder of 3 children by Fish has been confirmed. Young Francis McDonald was discovered missing by his parents in 1924. Out for the day playing catch with friends, McDonald never returned home. McDonald's friends and mother both reported seeing a gray man watching the boys play. After a search, McDonald's body was discovered with extensive signs of torture and sexual assault. One other exception to Fish's rule of choosing victims at the edge of society was Billy Gaffney. Fish attacked Gaffney, who was playing in the hallway outside his family's apartment in Brooklyn with his friend Billy Beaton in 1927. Both boys mysteriously disappeared. The neighbors immediately started looking for them. Hours later, Beaton was found on the roof. When he was asked what happened to Gaffney, the child famously said, "The boogeyman took him." Beaton was reported missing. Soon, reported sightings began flooding in, including one claiming to have seen an older man with the boy on a trolley. The boy was crying for his mother while the man was attempting to quiet him. The police matched the description of the boy to Gaffney. Gaffney's body was never found. Fish later confessed to murdering him, dismembering the body, cooking, and eating it. Just over a year after this crime, Fish committed perhaps his most infamous murder. He came across a classified ad in the Sunday paper by a young immigrant boy, Edward Budd, seeking employment. Fish responded, posing as a farmer wanting to hire a farmhand. When discussing this crime with authorities after his arrest, he noted his intention had been to kidnap and murder Budd, but then he saw Budd's younger sister Grace and his plans changed. He returned for a second meeting, offered Budd the job, and asked if the parents would allow Grace to accompany Fish to his niece's birthday party that evening. At his sister's home, he said the girls were about the same age and would likely make great friends. The parents granted permission, and Grace left with Fish that day, but never returned. After Grace's disappearance, not only was the wrong man tried for the crime, serving nearly a year in jail before the actual culprit was caught, but the family also received a letter from Fish. Riddled with misspellings, the note relayed what had happened to the girl and how Fish came to his lust for human meat. Although in the letter Fish claimed the girl died a virgin, he confessed during an interrogation with police that he had raped her. However, Fish was known to compulsively lie, so it is impossible to know the facts of the case. The trial for the murders of the 3 children lasted 10 days. Albert Fish pleaded insanity, claiming to have heard the voice of God telling him to kill the children. The jury heard evidence from his children, doctors, and victims' relatives. The most famous and disturbing evidence from the trial was an X-ray of Fish's genitals. Over 20 needles had been embedded there by Fish himself. There was much debate on whether his sexual fetishes meant he was insane, but ultimately the jury found him sane and guilty, and the judge ordered the death sentence. Upon his initial arrest, Fish boasted that he had had a child in every state. This would skyrocket the number of victims, exceeding 50. However, it remains undetermined if this meant molestation, cannibalization, or both. As Albert Fish was also known to lie and exaggerate, it is unclear if he can be taken at his word here. As it is, the deaths of the 3 children were enough to send Fish to the electric chair at Sing Sing. Thanks to his hunger for human flesh and horrifying fetishes, this boogeyman will live in infamy. The Child Eater. Ooh, the boogeyman.
So we got one more story coming up here. Did you cover Jamestown Colony, perchance?
Nope.
You familiar with that one?
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
So Jamestown, Virginia. And it's been rumored for a long time, but this is May 1st, 2013. Archaeologists in Jamestown, Virginia uncovered the first physical evidence of cannibalism in one of America's earliest colonies. The cannibalism, they believe, occurred during the winter of 1609 and 1610, the so-called starving time at Jamestown, when lean conditions and disease killed off more than 200 settlers. The timing of the cannibalism suggests that it was indeed survival cannibalism, not ritual cannibalism. Forensic evidence suggests she was dead, that she died of starvation or disease and was dead before she was cannibalized, says Jim Horn, Vice President of Research and Historical Interpretation with Colonial Williamsburg. Bill Kelso, Chief Archaeologist of the Jamestown Rediscovery Project, and his colleagues have named the skeleton they found Jane. She was all of 14 years old when she died. Kelso and Horn said the discovery confirms written accounts of cannibalism that were previously seen as a ploy to receive additional resources from Europe or stir infighting within the colony. There was a good deal of factionalism between different groups in Jamestown, throwing insults at one another, Horn says. It was conceivable that they were sensational stories passed around to defame the colony. Now, we can be absolutely certain it has taken place. The physical evidence is conclusive and critical. About that physical evidence, Kelso says that on the skeleton there are marks made by different tools such as knives and cleavers. There are hundreds of cut marks, sawing marks along the jaw. Some of them suggest the removal of soft tissue and the brain. We feel the nature of the first cuts on the skull, which were close together, were done to someone who was either unconscious or already dead. He called the discovery totally unique and said there has never before been any physical evidence of cannibalism in an American colony. It's the needle in the haystack. Though archaeologists knew that the starving time in Jamestown was particularly brutal, previously found artifacts suggested that settlers subsisted on wild animals such as turtles, black rats, and snakes. Horn says the discovery of survival cannibalism in Jamestown shows just how tough times were. It underlines the incredible challenges that early colonists faced. Most European colonists failed within 6 months to a year, he says. This gives us a vivid impression of the terrible conditions endured by settlers and their endurance and perseverance. Had Jamestown failed, it's possible the course of American history would be rather different, thereby suggesting that America was indeed founded upon cannibalism. Who would have thought? I've always heard that, though.
Yeah, I remember hearing about Jamestown.
So Jack Halloween says, I wonder what body parts are tastiest and most nutritious. Well, Jack, I don't know, and I'm not going to berate gays. I don't know if you're gay or homosexual, but I would say that we have learned through this storytelling tonight that the penis is not very tasty. It's very rubbery. I don't know. Well, you're the one that read that, and now you're going to act.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I know that women today, some of them today even eat their placenta. It's the most
Well,
nutritious
that was a common thing. There was a lot of protein in the placenta, and during the course of history, that was common that people did. Now, that's considered maybe not appropriate. I know that, believe it or not, in my age group, like I'm ancient, my sister was born at home on Roger Street, there in Athens. She was born with my mother on the couch, and my dad buried the placenta in the backyard. Now everything's sanitized and whatnot, and you're mostly born in the hospital, and they dispose of this nutritious placenta in other ways.
women are actually choosing to have it now, and they'll take it and they will dehydrate it and put it in pill form and swallow it.
Well, so if you know somebody that's about to give birth, you might want to go talk to them and say, look, we're hungry over here. Don't throw that away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have gone. It's now 3 minutes to the quitting time, and Kevin has not talked about any of his lustrous books that he's written over the last few years of his life. Would you like to now partake in your time of sharing all those wonderful books that you've written?
Yes, just go to myhauntedDolls.com and check out my shop and purchase
Bye-bye.
nonfiction books about my haunted items. There's My Haunted Collection, The Dark Side, and there's the original book, My Haunted Collection. And there are supernatural novels out there like Crimson, the Blood Painting, that are, some of them are based on some of the items that I actually have in my collection, and others are just fiction stories. And speaking of stories, I got the newest book, Dark Awakening and Other Tales for a Midnight Hour. Original short horror and supernatural stories written by moi. written by me.
Okay, moi. You're not talking about your audio book and your Kindle book.
Why you didn't get finished? Yes, my books are also on Kindle out there. They're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. They're on Kindle if you'd rather ebook, and if you'd rather audio book, there are a couple of them, including Crimson the Blood painting that I flashed up there a second ago. Where'd she go? There she is.
Well, keep in mind also,
Actually,
folks,
that's on audio. Eh?
Kevin, you don't want him to. Kevin has a good appetite. Let's put it that way.
Oh,
And,
Lord, have mercy.
we don't want to see him resort to cannibalism. So
I'm
buy
not
his book
kidding
so that he can go to Publix or Walmart and get his groceries. The cost of food has gone up, and like I said, Kevin is he's a growing boy. He likes to eat. Him and his dad go out and eat a lot too. They find excuses to go out to these restaurants, like people coming to visit them. It's like, oh, you're coming to visit? Let's go out and eat. By the way, here is a book that you need to read because we in dealing with ghost hunting and all this stuff, and even tonight's show about cannibalism, we're dealing with dead people. And there's a lot of interesting stories about dating the dead. It covers our relationships with dead people, goes back quite a ways, and some interesting stories. So pick up your book. You can go to datingthedead.com and learn more about that book, and you can find all my books on Amazon and a few other places as well. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it at 9 p.m. And somebody left us Jack said he's 70 and he was thinking muscle meat like thigh or maybe organ meat like heart. So Jack, you're a couple of years older than I am, not far removed from my age. I would think that muscle meat might be, I don't know. Kevin, you got any thoughts on what would be the best part of the body to eat?
I have no idea.
I wonder if a woman's breast would make good food. I mean, men do like to attack that breast. I always like to say I like that chicken,
chicken that turkey breast.
Lick on them thighs and hold them two breasts in your hands.
Although some people do like liver.
No. Are people white meat or red meat?
People would be white meat. Well, I don't. Yeah, and skin color wouldn't make any difference to the color of the meat. I think we're all white meat. Well, there must be some brown meat in us too.
I mean, I'm curious if we're more like chicken or we're more like beef or.
Everything tastes like chicken.
Not everything tastes like chicken.
I know there's a little bit of tuna fish according to what body parts you're eating on the female. Some places on a female taste like fish. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious as to whether we taste more like pigs or chicken.
Jack, do you know what an expert is? An X is a has-been and a spurt's a drip under pressure.
You're gonna be crazy, and
about the time that you think we can't come up with some new interesting conversations, we spent 2 hours talking about eating people and human sacrifice. So that we can go on and on. There's a lot of that out there, and like I said, not to belittle the Christian. Well, Jack says that he thinks the humans would be red meat. So I don't know. I know that. Yeah, I'm going to stay out of that right now. Okay. All right. What are we going to talk about next week, folks?
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll think of something fun.
Something besides white meat and red meat.
Jack, Caitlin, anybody out there listening, if you got a subject matter you would like us to cover that deals with the abnormal, the quirky, the strange, and the far, far out there, let us know. Send us a suggestion, and we will dig into it. That's for sure. Okay, now Kevin, for next week's show, we didn't get a chance tonight, but Kevin indicated he lost a little bit of weight. We want to do a comparison twerking show next week. And
not twerking. It's your turn to twerk.
It's a turkey. Thank you all for joining us and enduring our insanity. And I'm sorry, Jack, but we're not. I'm not an expert. I don't know about these two guys.
No, I don't know nothing about it.
Okay. If you were to base your taste alone, you might be tempted to conclude that human flesh mostly resembles that of swine.
Of what?
Of swine, of pigs.
A pig.
Oink,
Well,
oink.
Now, I didn't know
right,
barbecue
yeah,
food.
because she loves pork chop. What part of the body would be pork chop?
I don't know. Probably the butt.
Well, I know that Kevin would make good Boston butt.
Oh, shut up.
Now, I
We
have
call it Chelsea butt.
run fires before on humans that have been burned in fires, and I don't eat barbecue for years.
Did you investigate to find out if we're red meat or white meat? Did you look at that?
Like swine, like pig.
So that's kind of
That's
meat.
white meat.
That's white meat.
Is that white meat? Okay.
Yeah, pork. The other
There's
white
a
meat.
suggestion that we taste like pigs, and some of us are pigs, and we have white meat. So there's the answer to your questions from the experts at Abnormal Alabama and MyHoneyDog.com. With that said, it's time for us to sign off. And by the way, somebody painted me a picture.
Ah,
Isn't it cute?
Okay. Y'all have a good night. Peace and love.
you do.
Peace and love. Remember,
Yeah.
peace and love.